Greetings. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and this is a talk on the 5 Hermetic Elements. Earth, air, water, fire, and spirit. The 5 elements in Hermetic occultism. The formula of Pentagrammaton, and the powers of the Sphinx. In this video, I want to crack open the meaning and practical applications of the 5 elements and thereby demonstrate their value. One way to achieve supernal consciousness is to overstimulate the Ruach, thereby transcending it. To do this, one must have both a lot of knowledge and just as much magical experience to apply that knowledge. In this way, the Kabbalah is the greatest means to an end, and I will draw heavily upon it. Let's begin. The first thing I learned about in Hermetic occultism was the 5 elements. And I was told first and foremost to memorize their symbols. 4 triangles and a circle with 4 spokes. I suggest the same to you. Memorize these 5 shapes to start off, and think about why they are shaped as such. By appearance, there are 2 cones or cups and 2 spears, representing feminine and masculine aspects of nature. Then there is the circle with 4 spokes, which is spirit. The 4 lines inside of it, to me, clearly represent the 4 elements, all within a circle which represents perfect unity. The circle is one, like the universe and God or the light are all one. But the circle is shaped like the number 0, which indicates the Kabbalistic Zero, no thing, the true God, incomprehensible. On the tree of life, the lowest sphere is Malkuth. Malkuth, Hebrew for the kingdom, is the sphere where the light from the highest point has descended down into, and through many a process has crystallized, thus causing the world around us. The best description I can give of Malkuth is that it is the home of the elements or elemental forces. More on that in a moment. In Thelema, we use the Emerald Tablet's axiom, quote, "That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, working the miracles of one, as all things were from one. Its father is the sun, and its mother the moon. The earth carried it in her belly, and the wind nourished it in her belly, as earth which shall become fire. Feed the earth from that which is subtle with the greatest power. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and becomes ruler over that which is above and that which is below." End quote. This is important because in esotericism, this statement can apply to nearly every symbol of which I am aware. This includes the elements. For the elements to manifest at the lowest point, there must therefore have had to have been a potential for them in the highest, and whence they ushered forth. The Taoists understood this and the idea of manifesting any and all things from the Tao, what Kabbalists call the Ein Sof or the Kabbalistic Zero. Crowley summarized this formula in 0 equals 2. Opposing forces are easily united to create a new thing. This takes place in the lowest level through the elements, higher up through the sun and moon, and higher still through the Tao Day, +1 plus -1. But, sticking strictly to the elements, humans are born into ignorance and must grapple from birth through the earliest stages of childhood with mastery of the elements, which compose their bodies. Their bones become denser, so they can begin to walk upright. Their minds begin to learn about their surroundings. They start with primitive emotions to make sure their needs and wants are met. They begin to learn and seek out experiences which call to them. This last point is vague, and as far as at its highest aspirations, I mean that in our American society, kids begin to like certain things more than other things, whether that be music, sports, collecting, games, friends, or rarely, reading and education. Very few have had any spiritual notions in early childhood. At least here, in this country, unless it is forced upon them, which is always bad because they do not learn the most important spiritual idea, in my opinion, that everyone is responsible to seek out the method of attainment which is best suited to their own nature. While one religious system may work perfectly for one's parents, it may be disastrous for the child, or vice versa. I will now give full accounts of the elements. Earth is the flesh and bones, the matter of the human. It is the chemicals which make up planetary bodies. It is finances, labor of all kinds, including a person's livelihood and gravitational forces. Earth is nature. It is the womb and the grave, the place where seeds are planted and nourished. Air is the void between things, the space which oxygen travels through when we breathe. It is thoughts which were considered to flow through the ether and be received by the individual's mind. Air is the mind which changes constantly as thoughts flutter through the brain in an ever-ongoing breeze, one after the next. It is the space which carries the heat of the sun. Water is our blood. It is the dew of immortality, the emotion of one which can take any shape, like water filling a cup. It is the fluid that the seed needs to grow. It is the rain upon earth, like the embryonic fluid that supports the growth of life. Fire is passion and aspirations. It is force and motion, energy. It is the electrical pulses that force the heart to beat and the brain to transmit communications through the nervous system. It is the sun and all light. That being said, if these are the four elements, spirit, the fifth, is the glue that binds them together. It is the underlying consciousness of all things and things that are not, especially the astral life. When it comes to the powers of the Sphinx, to know, to will, to dare, to keep silence, and to go, knowledge is air of the mind. Will is intensity and fire. Dare is courage conquering fear, thus water, emotional. Silence is mandated as an after-clause of performing magic, and thus earth. Go is spirit, for it is motion and doing all previous things. It penetrates the other four powers simultaneously. The Beast 666 has written also that the first four powers correspond with the four cherubim. The bull is life and thus earth. The lion is light, thus fire. The man is liberty, air. The eagle is love, water. These ideas are then applied to the four sides of the pyramid, which all rise up to a singular point which connects them and is spirit, and spirit is also the flat square base at the bottom. That spirit plays double above and below. It is very much reminiscent to my mind of the sun and the moon. The sun at top, whose light is reflected back off the moon, parentheses, or earth / Shekinah, end parentheses, which is at the base of the pyramid. So now, having given a summation of the five elements, I want to take a look at the tree of life. There are four worlds attributed to the Hebrew characters Yodhi, Vav, These four worlds correspond with fire, water, air, and earth respectively. They are placed as such. Atziluth, at the very top in Keter, is the archetypal world and is basically fire. The next two spheres is the world of Bria, which encompasses Bina and Chachma. It's the world of creation and water. Below the abyss, the next six spheres, where you would find the Ruach, is the world of Yetzirah, creation. The bottom sphere, Malkuth, is the world of Asaya, basically completion or work. Action, the world of action. So these four worlds also can be applied on this large tree of life, which is essentially nearly 40 Sephiroth, all connected by Keter and Malkuth. So each tree will have its own. So the top tree is fire, the next one is water, the third tree is air, and the bottom tree is earth. And so these again are the worlds applied to Yodhi Vav of Atziluth, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asaya. Basically, this is a more complete function of how each element has gone through almost an alchemical process to transition into the next element, and thus starting with the no thing and then the light, you then get earth all the way at the bottom, as this is a more complete process. Instead of just a single 10-sphere tree of life, this is a way more complete idea, because each part of the tree has its own elements. So in the world of Atziluth, you have Atziluth of Atziluth, you also have Bria of Atziluth, you then have Yetzirah of Atziluth, and you have Asaya of Atziluth. So it's almost like the tarot, where you have the Knight of Wands, you have the Queen of Wands. So Queen is water, Bria is water. So Bria of Atziluth on that top tree of life is basically the watery aspects, of the fiery world. Basically, now, what's happening in this four-world schema is that the light of Kether is creating the universe, creating everything in the universe, from the cosmos, the suns, the moons, the planets, humanity and Earth and all of that. In the world of Atziluth, fire, what's happening is the light is so hot that it begins to vibrate. This vibration sets off from the heat condensation. This condensation in the world of Bria is collected, and now you have these two primordial elemental forces, fire and water. The fire constantly heating, now this water that's being created, right, is turning into air, a vaporous, noxious gas in the void of space at the beginning of time, shortly after the Big Bang. Now, with this gaseous air and this heat, there becomes an immense pressure, and basically that pressure descends down into the final world and goes through many an alchemical process under that pressure, and it becomes dense, and that's how the light is manifest and crystallized into physical being or existence. And it's very abstract because there is no like rationale that we yet have in scientific terms to understand this. So these symbols are really meant to be meditative tools to understand how life was made, and then teach one how to manifest their will through these elemental forces, both in nature external and nature internal. Then there's another schema that places the four elements of Yodhi as such. You have Yod in Chakma, which represents the paternal father, the primordial father, or the knight of the tarot. In Bina, you have He, which represents water. These two forces again combine, and they create the Ruach, which is the letter Vav, which is seated in Tifereth, right? And then also, that's the sun. They also create a daughter from the uniting of the mother and father in the supernal realm, which is the He final, which is in Malkuth. It's essentially very similar to the plan of the four worlds in Adam Kadmon. Only I would say in this schema, spirit plays double, in that spirit would be in Kether, right? And then it's also the rest of the tree of life as well. It's underlying everything. As I said before, spirit is really that glue that binds everything together. Then take a look at the letters without the tree of life. I assume everyone is aware that with Yod-He-Vav-He, Tetragrammaton, the name of God, by adding a Shin into the midst, the name of God becomes Yahashua, and Shin, being both fire and spirit, signifies something very interesting, especially to Thelemites. Within the center of one's being is the seat of spirit. The heart is symbolically placed in the center of the tree of life, called Tifereth, beauty. This is very indicative of Liber El, chapter 2, verse 6, quote, "I am the flame that burns in the heart of every man and in the core of every star," end quote. Looking at the letters Yod-He-Vav-He stacked on top of one another, they take on the appearance of a human being, Adam Kadmon, the archetypal man. By adding the letter Shin in the center, the Vav becomes a phallus, and the Shin the torso. Here I will mention that it is worth meditating upon the image of Eliphas Levi's Baphomet, for the light of the highest connects with the phallus. Yod, which in the image of stacked letters is the head, is indicative of using magic to bring down the light. For according to the Zohar, Yod placed in Chakma allows the upper tip of the Yod to just touch Kether and thus be graced with its light. Yod, again, is the element fire, poignant, for the light is symbolized by the sun, the brightest, most fiery thing that the ancients could see. This light brought down should fill the aspirant, illuminating them at their core. The tree of life itself actually grows from the heart of the adept, and through the heart it is transmitted to others by the light. At the Vav, now placed at the level of the Ke-Phale, is in the place of the Muladhara. When performing mysticism and magic by invoking the light of the highest, the lowest point on the spinal cord is being stimulated, thus Malkuth or Yesod. Once this is done, Crowley has instructed students to make use of the Ida and Pingala, the twin serpent forces, to bring the light or kundalini dormant at the bottom back up, stimulating the rest of the chakra or Sephiroth system of the Tree of Life. This caused the tree to grow, and one ascends up it back to godhood. I presume that in the 1700s it was discovered that the tarot fit very well on the Tree of Life, and by that, the elements were attributed to each suit in the court cards. Obviously, wands are fire, cups are water, swords are air, and discs or coins are earth. The wand of the magician is used to direct light, which itself is symbolically fiery. Cups hold the creative force and emotional nature of the individual, and both are changeable, like the water in any shaped vessel. Swords are sharp and swift, which is how the mind should be. Swords are also the largest magical weapon, because people tend to overpride their mental aptitude, which is why Crowley writes in Book 4 that it is better to suffice with a dagger than a sword for humility. Last, discs or coins are earth, for they represent the paten, which holds the Eucharist, the body of God, the earthen substance of light. Coins obviously signify wealth and materiality. The court cards, as I mentioned, also represent the four elements. Knights are fire, Chakma the Yod, queens, water, Bina the Hay, princes, air, the Vav and Tiferet, or six spheres in the middle of the tree, and princesses, earth, Malkuth, the Hay final. There are core cards for each of the four suits, and this is very interesting because in each of the five elements are traces of the other element in small parts. In the Book of Thoth, Crowley writes, quote, "These cards have many manifestations in natural phenomena. Thus, the Knights of Wands has the attribution of Aries and represents swift violence of onset, the lightning flash. But the airy part of fire is sympathetic with Leo, the steady force of energy, the sun. Lastly, in the watery part of fire, the harmony is with Sagittarius, which shows the fading, spiritualized reflection, or the translucence of the image of fire, and this suggests the rainbow." End quote. You can look at it like this. When one works with the elements in ritual, you can feel them. Invoking earth should come with a strong, dense feeling. With fire, royal and energetic, even aggressive. When you feel the energy in the Knight of Discs, it has the overwhelming density of earth that overpowers the fire, leading to stagnation or depression via inability to act. Don't think of the card as bad, though, the Knight of Discs. It is like the Ents of Fangorn Forest in The Lord of the Rings, finally roused and ready to destroy. These may seem like contradictory ideas, but the cards in the tarot have many faces depending on circumstances. They are, after all, mercurial and must be treated with very carefully lest they confuse all too easily. In passing, I assume all listening are aware that the zodiac each correspond with an element or two. Virgo is both air and earth, while Aries is ruled by fire alone. All of this previous talk about the court cards leads me to the Tatfas of the Hindus. They are 5 colored shapes totaling 25 combinations. The best thing about them is that they very clearly display the fact that each element is contained within each other element. They can be used in many various ways, such as meditation tools to think on how each one relates to each other one and to the self. They can be used as astral portals into different realms of the elements. Crowley recommends using them in Libra E for Dharana. Essentially, they mean exactly the same thing as I have already spoken of in depth previously, but by analyzing their images, one can glean a bit more from a different perspective. I'll leave this to those interested, but I will give one example. One tattva is shaped as a black oval, which is spirit. To my mind, this is reminiscent of the Orphic egg, which holds within it all potentialities of creation. It is the Ein Sof, the no thing, that holds the babe Harpocrates within it. So, with the elements on the pentagrams, I believe the Golden Dawn made this association, but I could be wrong, and it could date back to Agrippa, or even beyond to the grimoires of his library lost in antiquity. That said, to look at the pentagram, at the top is spirit, colored white, for the light of the highest point of existence, the innermost. The 4 other elements correspond with the Enochian tablet. Earth is at the bottom left of the pentagram. air is on the upper left, water is on the upper right, and fire is on the bottom right point. These associations have been made because the points of the pentagram correspond with the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac on the wheel of the zodiac. Earth is the cherub of Taurus, thus the point connects there. Fire is the cherub of Leo. Water is the cherub of Scorpio, and air is the cherub of Aquarius. Lastly, there are several ways to work directly with the elements. The easiest way is to use the pentagram or lesser hexagram ritual. So with the pentagram, you'd pick a particular element and use the greater pentagram ritual, invoking that pentagram and that element into each quarter. Or you may make a very big ceremonial ritual dedicated to a particular element, writing in all of the correspondences to say earth or fire. You might invoke Malkuth or any Sephiroth which is ruled by a particular element you wish to experience. Or you might invoke a planet which corresponds with an element to experience it that way. You can astral travel into a physical representation of an element, such as a feather or a particular rock or crystal. Or you could simply invoke or evoke an elemental being. Whichever of these ways you choose will have its own specifications and purposes. Each method will vary greatly, and you must be aware of all such purports and ramifications. Of these many varieties, I will only speak about the elementals because they are most on topic here. There are classes of beings exclusively corresponding with the 4 elements. These are gnomes of earth, sylphs of air, undines of water, and salamanders of fire. So far as I'm aware, Paracelsus made this association, but it definitely stuck and was utilized in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, thus today in Thelema. As every culture across the ages has entities which correspond with these 4 categories, I cannot in this video go into every single type of being that could be classified under a gnome. This simple term could apply to trolls, goblins, leprechauns, little folk all across Europe, duendes of the Middle East and South America or the Caribbean, Tommyknockers of the United States, and on and on. Suffice that I will summarize what these 4 classes are and why you might choose to work with them. Perhaps in a later video, I will go into each class and outline an in-depth analysis of many types of entities and particular ones which fit into each elemental class. So starting off, gnomes are not the garden dwellers people have portrayed them in recent days with blue coats and red hats. No, gnomes are a generic term denoting a little people that dwell under the earth. They are guardians of earthly treasures. They are sometimes physical and sometimes mere spirits. When the folklores were made, my assumption is that people would see small holes in caves too tiny for an adult to access, and these were thought to be the home of such entities. They might even pass through solid rock and dirt. If a person walking through nature saw a formation in natural rock which resembled a doorway, it was probably thought that these entities would use this solid rock doorway as a portal to their realm. Like the element of earth, these gnomes have virtues and vices. Some more of one, some more of the other. They are attentive and stern. They guard their homes and treasures furiously. They are patient and powerful. Working with them can be beneficial in ways such as discovering career types to pursue or help with anxiety problems. Wrongfully, people are wont to summon gnomes to gain money. Avarice, as Crowley warns in Liber Librae, is the vice of the Sephiroth Bina, corresponding to Saturn. Looking at the mythology of Saturn, his avarice was so strong that upon hearing he would be usurped by his child, he began to devour his children as soon as they were born. Eventually, Zeus was born and his mother hid him from Saturn, which led to Zeus gathering the Olympians and overthrowing his father in the War of the Titans to avenge his siblings. Now, while Rome lived in abundance while worshipping Saturn, such impermanence is impossible to hold on to and must not be the focus of one's magical operations. The sylphs. These are more vague, and to my mind, are essentially like the Greek nymphs, and also are like pixies, especially of the tricksy and playful type. Sometimes sylphs are portrayed as beautiful, long-limbed women, sometimes as conscious gusts of winds. They are very mercurial. Some are overtly sexual. Some are interested only in riddles and mind games. To work with them correctly would be to interact with them to help you have the energy for long trips on foot or safety while flying in a plane. You might use them to gain some type of knowledge that you don't have access to, but be careful because that could also have pros and cons to it. Wrongfully would be to invoke them because you want to experience fairies, or else to curse a person to destroy their mind. Either way, one will come if called properly, and depending on what you attract will depend on what type of entity you will encounter. Should you debase a self even unwittingly, you might find yourself going insane, or suddenly coming down with sexual compulsions of a debased and degenerate kind that are harmful to you and potentially others. Undines of the water are most likened to mermaids, somewhat human but also fish, though others appear in the likeness of water nymphs. In my opinion, Salmakis, the water nymph that united with Hermaphroditus, was probably very well could be classified as an undine. As the element water is attributed to emotions and creation faculties of the unconscious, thus are the undines. Working with one properly may involve invoking them for the ocean's health, considering there is a plastic continent destroying the Pacific Ocean. Or one might invoke them to get the most out of an emotional experience, such as grieving. But to invoke them to cause, let's say, a tidal wave for destruction, or else to take away emotional pain to avoid processing whatever it is you need to process, would be disastrous. Salamanders of fire are the most intense. Fire is destructive, but it also breeds creation and new life. They are rulers of the higher aspirations. They can be very temperamental and wrathful. Many can appear small, like the sparks flying off of a campfire, but some are larger, like mid-sized worms, and some like gigantic fire-breathing dragons. Working with them to cool down a heated situation can be right, or wrong depending on the situation. Invoking them to spark creativity can be extremely beneficial, but then invoking them to serve one's wrath damages both them and the individual by laying unnecessary karma upon the magician. I hope that these brief summaries add to the conceptualization of the Hermetic elements in both practical and intellectual matters. I'm going to end right here. Love is the law, love under will. Later on.